All opinions expressed on Crosstabs are those of Brian and Reagan and do not reflect the views, thoughts, or opinions of individual legislators or the Legislative Assembly. Relax. Some things are just for fun. Guests likewise join the show to express personal views and opinions. We desperately hope they say something funny or entertaining, but thoughts shared, whether entertaining or stultifying, are those of the individual and separate from any role or a title a guest may possess. Enjoy the show. Or don't. But don't go whining about it if it's the latter.
We're clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Well, going live. Hey, did you notice like OPB now goes live on their Thursday? They do like a YouTube live thing.
No, I hadn't seen that.
I was talking to Dirk about that in the building last week or whatever, week before maybe or something, and I go, "How's that going?" He's like, "Well, it's different." I think you have to be a little bit more calculated in what you say when you go YouTube live, right? Because you can't really go back and edit it, which we never edit anyways. So
It's too much work. That's the real secret. It's not that the editing is not a good idea. It's just that it's a lot of work.
and I would never really edit for content because I kind of stand behind what I say. I think I would only edit because sometimes we can get boring. But because I've
Right.
listened to some other podcasts and man, oh man, you're just like, where are you going? This is the most boring spot you could ever possibly be. And then you went further into boredom zone. So
Well, yesterday was Mother's Day, and if we all just listened to our moms, think before you speak, you'd never have to edit a podcast, right? That's my mom said that plenty, I'm sure.
we
I'm sure everybody else's moms
probably
or
wouldn't have any
or
good podcasts.
and sometimes I think you go, no, this will make for good content, and then I say it, right? So,
Yeah. Then you say it
yeah.
out loud, you're like, I'm usually pretty good about self-editing on the fly, but you never know.
So what is even on the ballot in 2026?
Dude, I don't, dude,
One
anybody even
ballot in
care? Or not 26. I thought you meant the special election stuff.
Oh
Talk
man,
about
yes.
turnout. That's just a,
You should vote in school. I've come all the way around on this. I used to think the school board elections were cool in like this May off election. The turnout is atrocious. People don't know. This is actually, it's sort of, and I think the establishment part of education, both the school boards and the OEA want it to stay this way. They want as
yep.
few people involved in education as possible. And they would say, well, if we have it in the May election, it's nonpartisan positions, so it won't get political.
Yeah.
It's political.
Yeah.
It's gotten political. There's slates and there's parties and there's donors and everything. So I would say move these to May or November of a regular election where people actually vote. And maybe you do it runoff where it's, like because they're going to probably stay nonpartisan. That's probably fine. I don't, who cares? You have the May election. If nobody gets above 50%, you've got to run off in the general. I think that brings more attention to schools and what's actually happening in the schools. And since there is a lot of control at the local level, there should be a lot more voter input. It should be like a tax measure where you have to have 50% of the electorate show up and vote in order to do it.
Double majority for school board elections.
Not quite
Fire.
double majority, but
I
I
mean,
guess
you
that
gotta,
is double
it
majority. But
is. Yeah.
yes, yes.
We're dealing that with a bill we're working through on the House side now that we passed out of the Senate with kind of that. So I think I like the idea of primary elections, set them up like commissioner races, right? Top two move forward. If there's four running for a position, if it's just two, then whoever gets 50% of that election. But you're definitely going to have more people show up, and I think it's the cost to run an election too as well for the county clerks is pretty high to run through the whole process is a lot. The mailing, the postage, all that sort of stuff, right? To do everything. in a May election where you see some of these stuff where there's literally what one position of all of them is contested, and
Right.
the rest are just dumb positions on Parks Board or something that they do matter. I'm not saying that they don't matter, but like school board, spends a lot of your money.
Yeah.
Parks Board, if you live in Bend, they spend a lot of your money.
Oh, they need to just vote to dissolve that parks board. It can't even. Back to at the end of last podcast, how you don't need city government. We also don't need very many special districts. I mean, if you think it's just rare that a special district is going to have, because guess what the special district has to do? They have to have their own HR. They have to have their own communications department. They have to have their own IT or whatever. And sometimes they can do intergovernmental agreements to contract this stuff out. But again, only counties should run local government, and the counties should just be a little bit bigger, and they should have fire departments, and counties have parks department. I serve on as an advisory
Yep.
member appointed to the Lynn County Parks Board. We meet 4 times a year. We get updates. They ask us for feedback, and occasionally we'll vote on something. It's not a binding vote. The commissioners and the director make the decision, but they're getting input from local citizens and people and I'm sort of a great counter barometer because there's a lot of these guys. We've got a guy who works for a timber company. We've got former parks employees on the board, and I'm the guy who's like, well, I take my kids to a park sometimes. That's my knowledge level of parks. I don't camp very much, so I'm here to help balance everything out. Where I'm just like, I'm the guy in the room that doesn't actually know anything. So then I ask the dumb questions.
Hey, asking, there are no dumb questions, only dumb answers.
That's true. We see a lot of those at
Yeah,
work, don't we?
yeah.
We just hear the answer, we go, oh gosh.
Yep.
So,
In
all right.
special districts in Oregon, we can leave it at that. All right. Let's that's
Yes,
what Reagan.
100%.
I
All
agree.
right, so let's cover appointments.
Yeah.
You have
Been a little
Senator
busy.
we yeah, and I think maybe, we get an opportunity, and that reminds me that I want to do something about Senator Woods, sort of remembering him. So I'm going to send a text to a potential guest on that. Because I think, there's a lot of people that are going to miss Senator Woods. And a lot of people who found him to be collaborative and bipartisan. And so it's going to be a huge loss. And he was just replaced by Courtney Neron, and so it's the representative. And usually, I mean, that's kind of how you'd expect it to go. The representative usually has the leg up in that appointment process if you're a sitting rep, especially because if you're a commissioner, you vote against the sitting rep, are you really going to is that representative really going to hear your concern later on? I mean, they should, but are they
Yeah.
really going to hear it?
Especially during session. Like it's probably even more
Right.
pronounced if it
Yeah,
happens
you're
during
probably right.
session. Because a lot of people are saying, hey, we got to hit that, we got to keep the ground going. They kind of understand the issues that are kind of happening in the building and all the things. And plus, depending on where the seat is, I think it also matters, is it competitive? Is it not? And then that changes the game a little bit too with who do you want to put in there that gives you some opportunity. So regardless, they all settled on Rep Neron, who's now Senator Neron Milsney. She used her maiden name, which I thought was kind of cool. So she went to because that's where she grew up. She now represents the area where she grew up. So she wanted to use her maiden name. I thought that was kind of fun. Plus, I think almost every female that's married now should use two names. I think that's required.
It does. It seems to be a trend. Um, so and I was looking, I Googled it actually, and they have the Washington County Commission, which is where the bulk of this, it includes Washington, Clackamas, Yamhill, but the bulk of it is in Washington County, of the vote, because it's a weighted vote by population. And so they actually have like a whole packet and press release and all this stuff. And the one thing I can't find in there is like the names of this stuff. It looks like there was two candidates. There was Rep Neron, there was Jeanette Shaw, there was a third guy, but he threw his support behind Neron, which tells me that he's definitely going to be in the running for the House seat.
Yeah,
And
because now
wants
you got to fill
probably
her seat.
wants Neron's support for the House seat. That's what I would say.
But see, the appointment for that shifts a little bit because her seat is split between Clackamas and Washington. So
Yeah.
I think it pulls all Yamhill out, which probably hurts us to get more of a moderate candidate. But with Clackamas in there, and that's Ben West's area. Maybe he should appoint himself. Uh,
Dave Backen is the name of the other
Dave
candidate. So it's
Backen.
Dave Backen, Jeanette Shaw, Courtney Neron.
I think here's my take on the Neron Woods stuff, and I like Senator Woods. I think that politically, or like how he voted on the floor, wasn't moderate. Was basically voted however the Democrats wanted him to vote. However, I would say the difference is he wasn't an activist on the floor and off the floor. So he was way more moderate in committees. He was way more moderate in conversation. He was way more amenable to amendments that would help maybe kind of not pull down some of the political leveraging in bills. So that's where I found him to be a pretty moderate guy, was in that part, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if a bill got to the floor and leadership said, we need you to vote, yes on this bill, I mean, he showed up and voted yes. So it wasn't that really wasn't where, but I think what matters is that behind the scenes conversations that happened, the friendships, the cross the aisle communication that happened within the building before it ever got to the floor. And I think I see Neron, now Senator Neron, to be more politically left and a little more activist left versus being more of a cross-party communicator that Woods was. And I think that's evident in, I think, the Senate leadership holding a few bills back, and now all of a sudden they got second readings last week. I think there's a few things that all of a sudden move when they didn't think they had the votes because either Woods was on the fence or just wasn't there,
Mm.
right? And then because that gets them back down to 16, which is pretty tough. And then with Neron showing up, when they just turned the green light on a couple of those bills that literally sat on the president's desk for a month, which is
Yep.
crazy. So
Which
that
is how
tells me,
long Woods was out, roughly,
yeah,
right?
now they know they have the votes.
Yep.
So that's a bummer for me from that standpoint. I hope that when representatives go from the House to the Senate, I do think they moderate a hair. I've seen that with recently with representatives that have come over to the Senate from the House. I think Senator Salmon, I think Senator Reynolds, I think even Senator Pham have all kind of moderated a little bit. Not that they're giving up their core beliefs, but I think are a little bit more amenable to some communication. And I think it's just because there's half the people that you have to deal with. So your committees become way more. I mean, 5 people in a committee versus 12. You tend to get to know people a little bit more.
And I think your influence increases because there's half the number of members. You have to run half as many times, which sort of I think leaves you freer. Especially usually senators are a lot more in their first half of their term. They're a lot more free, and then they tighten it up right before reelection, right? Having to vote more party
Yeah.
line. You feel a little safer to do that. It's hard to beat an incumbent state senator, even in a district that kind of may work against them, right? People don't try to replace their U.S. or their state senators very often, but they'll churn through your house. It's just the nature of the way they're set up, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing to watch is does she become more of who she really is? Probably. And the question is more of who she really is. Is she more of an activist or is she more of a lawmaker? And that's the hope in the Senate, at least, is that you get some of this balance, a little bit more of this uh, tepidness on because the House is just go, go, go. We're just introducing ideas. They're all bad ideas. And then you just see which ones can escape the Senate, right? And the hope is the Senate kind of works on that a little bit.
Such a strategy. At some point, we should talk about how a lot of lobbyists that want to pass bills or even members, like you'll see House members want to start their bills on the Senate
Yep.
because they got killed on the Senate and they started them on the House. And it's a very interesting strategy with where you want to start a bill on what side of the chamber, depending on the makeup. So I think it does, you're right, it does change the way things are a little bit. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of happens. What's
Yep.
going on in other political news?
Okay, so ballot PD. I just did this quick search. I said, what's on the ballot in 2026? So here's what it's showing me. Check marks. U.S. Senate, I think that's Merkley. And there's a lot of, we've talked about this already. There's a lot of drama because he's like, well, his staff is like, Merkley will have an announcement this quarter, which is like the weirdest thing ever. Again, and has sent a lot of Democrats into overdrive. The invisible primary happening
Yeah.
inside the party elite and the donors is just alive and well. Everybody's running for Senate. And then when he makes his announcement, is he running again or if he's not? I tend to think he's not because, again, if you're saying, well, I'm here to battle the Trump administration, well, running and winning in 2026 would be how you battle the Trump administration continually, right? And if you don't run and you don't win, you're no longer going to be battling the Trump administration. So again, that's why people think he's not running because he says, well, my priority is stopping Trump. And it's like, well, you don't stop Trump, not in the Senate, right? So anyway, so you have that. And funny enough, Ballotpedia, because we don't have filing isn't open. Filing won't be open until September. So, but they do have a guy named Timothy Skelton who's listed as a Republican running for
Oh,
U.S. Senate. So I don't
pretty
know anything about the guy. His logo includes a hammer. I'll send this to you, Brian.
cool.
But I guess if you're looking for a client, maybe. But anyway,
Never mind.
um, yes. So we've got that race.
Then we
And
used
then
to make fun of all the it's like sometimes Democrats that we use either like the hammer and the sickle, like the Russian thing. Oh, the commie.
the communism, the
I think
symbol of communism.
yeah.
Yes,
If
we
if
should make
I'm
fun of that.
here's Republicans, don't use a hammer.
It's I understand that what they want to say is hard work, but in Oregon sometimes. But actually, you're running in the Portland area, you split them up, but you put them on the logo. Just try to get a couple extra votes, right?
Yeah.
We also have U.S. House, obviously, because they're up every 2 years. We've got governor. We've got a couple candidates for governor on there, including Danielle Bethel, a good friend of the pod, Chael Sonnen. And I kind of wonder if he's actually going to materialize as a candidate, or if he's just enjoying sort of the press by saying I'm going to be the governor of Oregon,
I've
and then a
seen
crazy
nothing.
guy
No
Kyle Dyke.
pack or anything, so he can't be raising or spending money. If he is, he's illegal. So
Right.
I doubt that I'm with you. I think he loves the theater.
Yeah, a lot of people do. A lot of people love the idea of running for office, but when the rubber meets the
Yeah.
road to actually doing it, very few people. And then go follow the I don't know how they pronounce it, the Dyke family, Duyck. So this guy, Kyle, he's on Twitter all the time tweeting about he tweets some of the most insane stuff. Like the deep state keeps deleting his campaign website.
Yeah.
But anyway, his header image is a picture of his family with Tina Kotek and their family farm. And I'm just like, this account has to be like a parody account. Like there's AI generated images. The things he says are just completely insane. I like, but he's also saying I am the uh, presumptive nominee
Presumptive. Yeah, I
for
love how he says it.
Republican. I
He
don't.
trolls
But
us
if you
on
want
Twitter.
something really funny, and Twitter's not real life, nobody's gonna vote for this guy. But if you want a funny follow, he is. So I will link his candidate.
Oh,
And then
gee.
you've got, of course, Danielle Bethel, who I would consider at this point the presumptive nominee because the competition, both her, she's a good candidate, and also the competition isn't there.
Uh, yeah, I would agree as well. The Dyke family, a lot of those, his family, I don't know, I can't connect dots for you, but a lot of them are Thousand
Right.
Friends people.
Oh,
So
good.
not a fan.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
right.
wing of the Farm Bureau that is anti building anything and anti anything, except for unless they want to do something on their farm, then you need to get out of their way. So that sort of BS kind of mentality of we don't want homes, but yet we don't want the state, telling us what we can and can't do on our farm. But, we don't want our neighbor to sell their farm so somebody could put up a golf course or homes is I just hate that mentality. And I think that's kind of horseshit. You can't be for property rights on one hand and then be completely against it when it comes to what your neighbor does on the other hand. I think that you just can't.
The disciples of Tom McCall, protecting Oregon's farmland by crippling the economy.
Yeah, right.
Um, That's exactly what happens. A house costs $750,000, but don't worry, guys. We saved some EFU land that's never
Yeah,
going to do anything.
thank God.
Okay. Moving on. So you've got that. You've got the governor's race, and I think it could get interesting. The governor hasn't announced her plans either, but no one's also asked her if she's running for office. My assumption is Kotek's going to run again.
Yeah.
Now, what she's going to run on? I'm not 100% sure on that front. So she probably won't talk about housing quite as much as she did before. But to be seen. And then you've got the legislature, obviously. So the thing that's going to matter is you've got a couple of state Senate seats that people can't run again in. And then you've also got oh, the BOLI commissioner. That's right. The BOLI
Yeah,
commissioner is
bully
up.
statewide.
And I think BOLI would be good, especially because the commissioner has just been out there union hacking it up, man. Might as well be a card carrying member of AFSCME or SEIU or one of those guys. Just anything that's prevailing wage or could remotely be prevailing
Yeah.
wage is made prevailing wage, even if it's affordable housing for homeless. So I
But
think there's a good opportunity actually for a Republican to run, somebody who's off cycle, a commissioner, a senator, or a rep who is like, wow, the House of Representatives is not as much fun as I thought it was. Run for bully commissioner and only talk about housing because I think that Oregonians housing's high on the list. No one knows what the bully commissioner does, and also she's terrible on housing. And actually, I think that that could create a race where there normally wouldn't be one, and you might run into some of these guys. You've got businesses who've had negative bully decisions, including a lot of stuff related to COVID, hangover COVID fines and stuff that they're continuing to enforce, and these housing things where you might get some developers and some affordable housing folks and some everybody who's been on the negative end of the receiving of bully commissioner decisions go,
yeah.
yeah, we're kind of tired of this. And so we need to create a race out of that, I think.
And on top of that, I think you could lay all of Portland's housing woes on her shoulders.
Yeah.
And she is, and go read any of the stuff that Nigel's written about at Willamette Week about how she literally basically is she's her entire campaign was paid for by unions.
Yep.
And Nigel laid it out clearly. I mean, I don't know if that's not as close to corruption as you can get, without actually taking bags of cash, Shamia. But I think and who knows if she did or not. I don't know. I have no idea.
It was stacks of cash.
Stacks of cash. That's right. I forgot that. Stacks of cash.
Yes. Yes.
Remember we bought like stacksofcash.com and we were gonna like do a whole thing?
Remember when we introduced the bill and got a billion sponsors, and the
Yeah.
Democrats were like, "This is part of campaign finance reform now."
Not only
was
that,
funny.
they killed Senator Knope's bill and made it
Oh,
their
that's
bill. Remember?
that's what
They-
yes, that's what they always do. But
yeah.
it wasn't even a question. They were like, "Yeah, we're gonna cover our butts by putting this in campaign finance reform.
Yeah.
No more
Anyways,
cash."
we
So,
digress, but I think you're right. I think there's a lot of things, the prevailing wage decisions, and you've worked on this. You've actually gotten LC opinions that her
mhm.
authority as bully commissioner or the authority as bully commissioner to determine whether things are prevailing wage or not. I mean, the difference, and I've really looked into the numbers on this stuff. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 30 to 50% additional cost. But also that stops, you can't build anything higher than 4 stories. You can't do any ground floor, childcare centers, nonprofits can't be in there. So you have these monolith kind of crappy, government housing looking buildings that are just horrible. And bully and prevailing wage stuff with the unions gets in the way every time. And they're a part of the reason why we have a housing shortage. And I think it is really a good opportunity for somebody to lay that blame at the Democrats' feet and the union's feet and create a lot of stink around it. Now that probably gives Governor Kotek some cover. If you go really hard against the bully commissioner at some point, that might give Governor Kotek a reason why she's not hitting her 36,000 unit target. Which,
Well, and I think, but again, the difference is action. The governor has put forward stuff that wants to build houses, and it's the legislature
yeah,
that tends to water it down, ruin it, reject it, and then, of course, obviously, the disciples of Tom McCall. But you also have, whereas with the bully commissioner, no effort, being made. The opposite of effort really
Yeah.
attempts to stifle housing.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, to me, that's the difference. That doesn't mean you have to agree with Kotek on everything, by the way. I still disagree with her on
Yeah.
almost everything else.
Well,
But
her
on this, we
executive
agree.
order on prevailing wage was a bad idea, right? I mean, so
Yes.
she's done a few things. I mean, a lot of things I would say that has not helped with housing. The biggest thing that she's done that hasn't helped with housing, she hasn't stood up to her side of the fence and just said, if you want to build housing, we need land and lots of it. And she won't stand up to that side of the fence. And that's her biggest fail in housing, to be honest with you. The other stuff is all minimal and builds 500 units there, 1,000 units there. It's not going to get us to the end goal. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, the cost of putting up a house doesn't change anything. Whether that house the cost of the land is I mean. We talked about that with Senator Knope. If a lot in Bend is $800,000, you're not building a house for under 1.5. So it just doesn't matter.
Well, and this is the crime that the Thousand Friends of Oregon do is they say, we'll just build in the UGB. There's plenty of in the UGB, but there's a ton of land that's counted in the buildable land calculation that isn't buildable because it costs too much to develop it. It's better left the way it is or used for some future use
Yeah.
when it's the only piece of land in a city of 2 million people, then somebody will eventually develop it into a high rise. But I don't even think you can build a high rise in Bend. I think they have a limit on how many stories you can build and all that stuff. And this is the thing is it's like, well, when it's land, it's Thousand Friends. When it's regulations and UGB inside, it's the cities, and they work together to make sure, whether intentionally or not, I don't know. They work together to make sure we don't build stuff unless it's built exactly the way they want it. And that's not, I mean, that's not freedom. That's not, proper. That steals people's property rights. We talked about this before. Ron DeSantis is trying to eliminate property taxes because when you buy your property and you pay it off, you should own it. And you shouldn't be continually charged for owning your property, right? Who actually owns the land? As long as you have to continue to pay property taxes, you're leasing the land from the government. And the truth of it should be is that the property owner owns that land, and we'll just find a different way to pay for. I'm for a sales tax. I'm not for a sales tax on top of all the taxes we already have, right? I think most Republicans, if the bill comes up and it's eliminate income tax, replace it with sales tax, or eliminate property taxes and replace it with a sales tax, 100% of Republicans are voting yes on that,
Blech.
right?
No.
Not 100%, but it should be. It should be a lot. It should be a high number because at the end of the day, I think that property taxes and income taxes are worse than sales taxes, and they're
Well, and they're
they're worse
attacked.
because they punish you for having land and they punish you for working. Whereas what you're doing is we're just adding on a little bit of cost to your consumption, and you can eliminate some of like the basic necessities that people need from that tax.
In economics, we call those regressive taxes versus progressive taxes. So if
Chief state economist Brian Iverson.
yeah, yeah, but the idea is you get taxed the better you do. And so if
Yes.
you want to move people out of poverty, if you want to move them up on the income ladder in life and the asset ladder in life, you're better off taxing people on what they spend versus on what they make. And I think that's the reality of it. Plus sales tax, you catch all of the tourists that come here all the time. You catch all those people that don't have to pay crap and so you can get them through the sales tax. Plus sales tax is also a little more predictable. So that also keeps our balanced economy a little bit better off. So the predictability of sales taxes is way better than the unpredictability of an income tax, especially at 9%. So it makes it very difficult
Yeah.
for us. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that sales tax is probably a better idea. The problem,
But that is a tangent. We're like two things removed from that.
I
That is a
know.
tangent from BOLI commissioner. A
Look at us
Republican should
going
run.
off with a sales
Here's
tax.
a list of potential Republicans that could run. These are the Republicans that can't run for state senate. You've got Cedric Hayden. I think not a terrible candidate for that particular race. So his sixth
Yeah.
district will be an open seat that in the House that's Jamie Kate, Darren Harbick. And then you've also got in this cycle, you've got Jeff Golden up in the third district. You've got Floyd Brzezinski. Golden's seat is totally winnable. Depends sort of on what the midterm looks like. Depends a little bit on if he runs or not, but we got pretty close to beating him the last time. If a couple things break our way that year, in that particular race, I think that race goes Republican. So it should be a Republican seat. There's no way to redistrict it and go get more Democratic votes. It's only about the behavior in Southern Oregon. You just got
Yep.
Ashland and Medford and then the rural areas
And
outside.
in the last, since redistricting to the end of April, that seat has moved 2 percentage points to the Republican side.
Wow.
Voter registration. So
Wow.
naturally, it's moving our way.
That's great. So that's good news. So there should be two or three good candidates interested in running for that, and then one of them should file and either beat Golden or whatever goofball they use to follow him up. Nobody's beaten Przanski. Is Przanski going to run again? Goodness sakes, man. Hayden can't run. Manning probably running again in seventh. You're not going to beat him, not in a general. Got same with Gelser Bluen. Um, Patterson's seat is weird because it should be competitive, and it was just not. The numbers were not good, so I
Yeah.
think it's going to be hard to fund that seat just because of that result. But we should still recruit a decent candidate
Yep.
there. I
Angela,
saw one bouncing around.
Angela Plowhead.
And okay, so
Yeah.
she's former vice chair of the Republican
Yeah.
Party. Probably decent enough candidate to give you a baseline what that seat's going to do, and for the future.
A lot of
Um,
state employees in that district.
yeah, that is, I think that's a factor that I don't know how we figure out how to crack that exactly. Does the
Well,
Republican have to take a pledge not to mess with PERS? I don't know.
so a
I mean,
lot of
it's
state employees are registered non-affiliated voters, or they're registered independents, but they vote hard left.
yeah.
And I think that's why that seat always looks a little wonky, like it looks like it should be more competitive than it turns out to be. Is I think that you get a lot of those folks that are in that seat that just kind of vote left to center. So the mood of the country is really going to probably determine that. That seat, I think that one's going to be interesting.
And then you've got Thatcher. She's barred from running again. That is Leslie Munoz. And Tracy Kramer was formerly in that seat, so maybe she mounts a comeback for Senate. I don't know. And then Kevin Mannix in that seat. And we've talked about Mannix's seat
Yeah.
potentially being competitive if he moves to Senate. Then
Bet the
you've got,
Democrats recruit Virginia Stapleton. I bet they grab her
please,
and run her on Senate. I would
and
think.
hopefully she makes more TikToks and podcasts. Please,
Or Medina.
please, please recruit either of those two candidates. I don't know who we need to talk to. We need to talk to, uh, yes.
Senator Jama.
Virginia Stapleton would be an
Sure.
amazing Democrat candidate, he
Yeah.
says, facetiously. And then you've got the Wood seat with Neron. She's running to get her full term in a normal cycle, which obviously works out. Solomon, taking a shot at Solomon before, does not seem to be panning out. There's things about one of the House seats, I think, that could get interesting at some point. I think long term, if Intel sort of collapses and they have to significantly reduce jobs in the area, it may change the makeup of that workforce a little bit, but I don't know if it changes it, if one company changes it enough. If there's a supply chain that's around them and all those jobs start to go other places, that could change the makeup a little bit of that area and turn one of those districts more, a little less industrialized, a little less, high income Democrat and a little more low income Republican. You could see a change there, but that's a macroeconomic trend you can't control. So for now, I'd say Solomon probably pretty safe. You've got Weber's seat is open, the 16th. This is going to be an interesting race. Absolutely, people should watch this one. It's a seat that Democrats will probably try to contest, but really have no business doing, I don't think, unless their candidate is Betsy Johnson. And I'm just going to go out there and say that she's unlikely to be a candidate for the Democratic Party based on how they've treated her lately. And they probably don't want her either, based on what she has said about their beautiful city of roaches. Roses. I'm sorry, roses. It's City of Roses.
Right.
So anyway, I don't think that there's a lot of love lost there between the two. So Betsy Johnson would obviously be an automatic contender, and she could be running under the Green Party or the Constitution Party. and people would be like Betsy Johnson, like she'd be in the mix, absolutely.
I,
Not statewide. She found that out the hard way, but in that Senate district, I think she's a factor. Her endorsement's a factor, and her running is a factor. So if you're a candidate and you'd like to win, you probably want Betsy Johnson's endorsement still. That'll probably be the case for a little while anyway. And then obviously Weber's, if you're a Republican, you want Senator Weber's district. I think she's pretty, her endorsement, she's well liked, I think. So that will matter
yes,
as well.
Senator Weber's great. I think it's a bummer that we lose her, but
Do you know anything about
yeah.
who might run for that?
Well, obviously, Representative Javity was kind of like everybody was looking to him because I think Rep. Edwards in the Columbia County area side, she's brand new in the state house, and so she would give way to Representative Javity if he wanted to move up. But I have it on good authority that he's not going to be seeking that out. So
Okay.
I think he's gonna hang out there. I'd still put him in. I mean, he can always change his mind, obviously, right?
Yes.
But I think. There was two people. There's one guy named Frank Mansfield that has put his name up, and I'm sure you'll put this in the. I don't know him. I heard he's not the best and the brightest that we could put forth. And then the other one that I'm trying to help push forward is we'll see if. But again, I would never do it in the wake of running against representatives. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Who knows? It depends. Is his name is Howard Dietrich, and he goes by Trip. And Trip Dietrich is a good friend. Kind of grew up in that Rockaway Beach, Manzanita area. Does a lot of stuff in Portland, and really kind of gets that Northwest Oregon anti-Portland kind of vibe. I think he really fits that because when you're an hour from Portland, you understand that you need Portland. Portland has to do well, but that's kind of become also the Portland playground.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of that. A lot of people use the beach up there and the stuff in those communities as second homeowners and all this sort of stuff. And it's really kind of been tough on those small communities to thrive and move forward as communities when half your homes are owned by people out of Portland. So it makes it
Yeah.
pretty difficult. So I think so far with what I've seen come forth, I think Trip would be a front runner for sure. I think he's eighth generation Oregonian. I mean, his great grandpa founded the Pendleton
Nice.
Roundup. I mean,
Nice.
that's kind of cool, right? So far we'll see. I don't know. It's very early, but I think that's a decent one. I think that we'll probably see some folks in that primary for Hayden's seat. I think you might see a pretty big class in that one. I think that one could be. I think that we probably won't for Thatcher's seat. I think, that's going to be a Mannix or a Kramer, I think, at this point. I'm not recruiting that one, so I don't know. It's not really my realm. I think the Bonham seat, that's the last one. I think Bonham would make a great BOLI candidate, by the way. I think that he understands business and labor. He sits on that committee.
Oh,
He
that's a
understands,
great point.
he understands that stuff like the back of his hand. He is a small business owner. Like he gets all of that stuff. And he's coming off as a Senate Republican leader. I think there's, you know, it's a nice way to maintain himself through a cycle when he can't run for the legislative stuff. I think, to your point, I think it's a better way to go. I think that would be a good off landing spot for him to go in there. I think he's friends with OBI and all the players that are in that mix.
Hmm.
I think that's a good spot for him. I really think it fits pretty well, and I think he can articulate that discussion of why Stevenson is just horrible for the state and,
Yeah.
and why he would be a better choice. I think they
You're
would
not
get
you're not wrong with that actually. That makes a lot of sense to me.
so. Who fills his shoes? Helfrich has been running for the. Will be such an old hat by the time Helfrich is when we get through the primary next year at this time, like a year from.
Yeah.
I feel like he's been running.
Well, and I mean for him the idea is, well, if I've been running for so long, people just kind of assume I'm the guy, right? I mean, that's the strategy when you announce early is
Yes.
like you're there, you've been there from the beginning. It's clear, right? So,
Yep.
Yes.
He's trying to box out. I think ultimately he's trying to box out Drazen. We all know that, right?
Right. Yes. Drazen
Um,
is rumored, but hasn't made any
yeah, and I'm
declarations.
pretty sure if she doesn't run, he'd probably still draw another candidate. I would assume from the Clackamas County area, but I think it does give Jeff I mean, I would say he becomes the front runner for sure if Drazen doesn't run. If Drazen runs, I think there's a lot of political thought of what that looks like. The other side of the hill versus the west side of the hill, and how, I was talking to a consultant that has worked in many races there for that Senate district, and they say that Republicans are more apt to vote for that person from the east side of the mountains versus the east side people voting for the person from the west side, from Portland.
Yeah.
So there's some anti-Portland biasness there that I think Jeff probably enjoys, being from Hood River in that group, and he's got a
Hmm.
pretty strong background and the Dalles area and stuff too. So I don't think it's a laydown as much as Drazen thinks it is. I think Jeff he's fighting for political future, right? So
Yeah.
that does change the game a little bit. But the one thing I will say in regards to Jeff is he's burning through cash.
Mm.
I mean, dude has been burning through cash. He had a
Is
decent
he
level of
building a podcast studio of his own, or is he doing other stuff?
I just all the digital stuff that I can tell through um his expenditures on Orstar.
Oh, interesting.
But I mean he's down to like 65,000 bucks in the bank, and he had well north of 120, 130 at the end of
Mm.
pain cycle that he was, I think, holding on to for this run. And if Christine runs and announce that nobody's going to give him money from a lobby standpoint and stuff, they're all going to hold off until Christine makes her decision.
Yeah.
It's just natural, right? I mean, I mean,
Well,
from a
and
lobby standpoint,
lobby can't give checks during session, or at least they're not
no.
supposed to. They typically don't.
But
The
even over
out
the
the
summer, it's going to be tough, right? They're going to hang out and wait until
Yeah.
and then even if she says yes, if she says yes, he's still not going to get money. So, and if she says no, then I think there's a better likelihood for him, to get money. But I think if she says yes, they both are going to have a hard time dragging lobby money
I
because
agree.
they're like, you know what, go find the locals and go raise your money. And then in the
Yeah.
fundraising effort of the world, I give the edge to Christine because she's clearly can raise money. So,
Yes. And I
uh,
do think you look at that too. Those Republican primaries almost always put lobby money on the sidelines unless there's a clear person with experience versus a person without, because typically the lobby's very, I will say, practical on this. If there's a candidate who's brand new and there's a candidate who has served, they almost always pick the candidate who has served because they would rather go devil you know, unless they're particularly bad on your client's issue,
say,
in which
unless they're the
case
devil.
they might do right, right, yes, unless they are the literal devil, in which case they may go the other direction. It may be a bit of a grudge match, but even then, it's a lot of times, especially with big lobby, it's hard to convince them, hey, we need to take out this one guy. This one guy
Yeah.
is our number one enemy. A lot of times it's hard to do that. And occasionally you can get that with the right scenario, right? But most of the time, lobby's like, Republican primary. We will see you later after the
Yeah, right.
primaries happened, right? And so then it's about local money. It's much more of a localized race. And honestly, I think a lot of times that's better because now the voter, I mean, not that the voters don't have the influence with the money. A lot of times they'll reject the candidate with more money. I think people just are, the candidate with the most money is also usually the candidate with the most name ID and the most organized. That's why they win, right? But sometimes that doesn't happen. And so making the race more localized, like taking that factor out of it a lot of times, it just it just makes it more of a local grudge match instead of a statewide grudge match, right? So,
So that was Representative Kate just calling me on my phone. She must have knew we were talking about the Senate
right,
seat.
yes, yeah. She was like,
She's
"Hold
got a
on, I have a
tracker
thought
on me,
here.
Reagan.
I have a thought." Yeah, you should get swept. You should sweep for bugs.
I've been
For
trying to get her to come on the podcast.
Oh yeah,
She's gun shy about it, but her knowledge is pretty intense on farmers and all this sort of stuff because
Yeah,
she actually is a
absolutely.
farmer. So I think that
Love to have her on. So let me know
yeah,
if
maybe at
you get
some
her on
point I
there.
can coerce her to come on board. I
Yeah.
think I think covering. I'm kind of glad we just stayed in the political discussion today. I think it's kind of like a
Yeah.
mid-session political discussion, which is kind of fun to see because you start because at the end of the day in the building we're talking about bills, but it's always in the context of what's going to happen outside the building, right? The
That's
politics
correct.
is always something that a lot of people don't really like to discuss, and I tend to lean into it and not shy away from it, and I think that helps sometimes when you just say, "Hey, I know politically it's hard for you to want to vote for this, or politically you can't do that, or and I think you have to look at the politics and understand it because it does matter outside the building, and the Senate seats matter most because that is going to determine kind of what happens on the House stuff. Because
Right.
we have some of these purple districts on the House are very like they're literally all the ones that are purple are the ones we're talking about in the Senate. So Weber's seat, Thatcher's seat, uh, Bonham's seat, like all of those ones all have the House seats that we're going to be talking about uh, come after we get done with session. So, and the other one is Senator Meek as well. We that was the last one. I don't think we haven't covered yet, but 20 is that 26?
I'll go through the rest. So you got 17th district, which I believe is Reynolds. You got the nobody's beating her in
Yeah.
a general, and probably not a primary either. 18th Campos, probably not. Although I'm sure that there's a good long list
I
of
feel like
normal
she's ran
Democrats
like because she
who
had to
would
do a
like.
2 year run and then she had to do another run and now she's got to do it again. It's crazy.
I think just as punishment for introducing bad bills, she should have to run every 2 years. But what do I know? And then you've got Rob Wagner, and I think, frankly, the best person to run for that seat is Ben Edel, and
Yeah, he
he
should
should
go for
ask
it.
the new Republican leader, whoever it may be, for a lot of money for that seat, honestly. Because I mean, it's totally winnable, Ben. You
Yeah.
just have to believe in yourself. And had the Republicans funded it last time, I mean, obviously we would have beat Wagner, right? I mean, that's if you, Brian, if you and my dad look at the list of things that you guys did in 22, the biggest mistake was not funding the race against Wagner. I mean, it was
Yeah.
so winnable. If
And
anyone
I
can't
knew
tell,
that rich white women living in Lake Oswego and Westland were going to move our way. We just missed our opportunity.
that's right. This is sarcasm, by the way, if anybody can't tell.
Like our
Uh,
worst demographic.
yeah,
There is not, for Republicans, there is not a worse demographic than rich, white, educated women. We are screwed.
20 Charles Koch could hand us $25 million and we'd be better off lighting it on fire than sending it into that race. Sure, if you want to have some fun with Wagner, yes, obviously, but it's not winnable. Um, so
Yeah.
anyway, then yes, Meek's seat in the 20th district, and I think Meek,
20, that's what it is.
you've seen him do. He's voted party line on a couple of things where you're like, would he really have done that 2 years ago? And that's where it's like, he's gearing up for reelection and he'd like to be locked in as the Democratic nominee, not have a challenge, not risk any of that stuff, right? So he's obviously gearing up to go again, taking a couple party line votes, and then you've got a representative or not representative,
Yeah.
Jama. You've got majority leader
Oh
Jama.
yeah. Yeah. East Portland. He'll
Yes.
be fine. The one house district there where Wawin is in has always been pretty challengeable, but
Yeah.
I think John himself is safe. There's no chance.
Totally. No. Yeah. So
Yeah, Meek
so you've
Seat's an
got.
interesting one. That one has also moved 2.2 points to the right.
Oh
So
wow.
voter registration has dropped below 10%. It's gotten, I don't know if it's quite Reagan. I mean, I just updated all these, which was kind of interesting. And I'm of
Oh,
course
good timing.
I'm not gonna put it in the show notes because I did the work and I'm not giving it away for free.
Nope.
So
But you'll email it to me after the episode so I can look at it.
yeah, for you, yeah, because
Sweet. Sweet.
but
Thanks.
the
Appreciate it.
reality is it's not necessarily that. Yeah, it went from actually hasn't moved as far as I wanted it. It used to be minus 10.5, which we only lost by what 600 votes, and it went minus 10.5 in
Brutal.
22. That tells you how far we moved. We moved the Kennemer needle against Mark Meek, and now it's 9.6, which is still a little versus like the golden seat was minus 8.2 and now it's minus 6.6. So that, and we only lost
Wow.
by 2%. So that tells you it's pretty good our way. And that's
Yeah.
where I
There's
really look at that
yeah.
one, and like, but Thatcher, so Thatcher's seat, right, is a good one. So it was minus 5.9 when we started redistricting, and now it's only minus 4.6. So that's also moving our way.
That's good. That's
So I
good news.
see those as good. And if you look at like Dick Anderson's seat, Senate District 5, we were
Hmm.
minus 3.6 at redistricting, and now we're minus 2.3, and he won by nearly 10 points, right? So
Yeah.
tells you kind of start doing the math a little bit. Whereas you say, is the middle, how far can the middle move to the right? The more urban you get, right, the less further right we can move that, I believe, which puts that Senate district, what is that? Whatever the one down south, six, I think, Golden Seat three. Sorry,
3.
that puts that one square into the crosshairs for
Yeah.
Republicans. Um,
Yep.
and Golden is kind of he's funky with the lobby, so he doesn't take a lot of the Dem money, and so they end up running IEs.
And he's pledged not to take big money, and
Yeah,
so Wagner sets up a big pack and then just funnels money in there from the
yeah,
outside. And of course, Jeff Golden has never heard of this money, has never heard of the people who have the money, would never ask for the money, didn't ask for the money, and frankly condemns everything that the money says,
yes,
and then enjoys, the benefits of the money. So yes, if you're Republicans, your goal is, lock in Bonham seat should be fine. Lock in Thatcher seat should be fine. Lock in Weber seat should be fine. You pour every available dollar and effort into finding the best candidate in 3 and winning that race.
I think so.
Because, and I think you want the best possible candidate against Meek too. The
Absolutely.
challenge there is that he will have lobby money to defend him because he's like he will take votes on the Senate floor that are not leadership approved votes, not the way they want him to vote. So he will be protected, I think. So he isn't going to be defeated by, an overwhelming amount of cash. It's going to be a lot more dependent on what the electorate looks like and if you voted right on the issues that matter when you get to election day or that last kind of
Yep.
6 weeks, right?
Yeah, but
So
start with the best candidate you can find.
yes,
Kind of
100%.
see where, because I believe that seat is going to basically, based on the House seats in 24, it
Hmm.
doesn't look winnable today. But I think yeah, I mean, we just have no idea what a year and a half looks like. So I think it's just going to be a tough one. But I would want to recruit the best candidate I can, try to get them to run up the base as best as possible, try to whip that Clackamas County Republican Party into shape, do their best on the ground stuff to really kind of develop that cohesive strategy, and then just kind of see, that it gets really expensive. That seat's still the most expensive state Senate seat in history.
Hmm.
I think we spent over $5 million collectively in 22 on that one. So I could see it being a barn burner again, especially because Medford is a fairly inexpensive seat for both sides. Just media is cheaper, all the stuff down there, right? So that
Yep.
becomes, $1 million, million and a half, probably if it gets super crazy. I think, but the Portland media could make this state Senate seat, and depending on how the House seats work in there, could really run it up pretty high, and it could be interesting. I think on that seat, that could be very interesting how that plays out. I think what also matters there is who's the Senate Republican leader. That's going to
Yep.
be challenging there. Like, what is their relationship like with Mark Meek? How does
Mm.
that play into it? The lobby is going to play into that one a big deal because Meek's been pretty business friendly,
Yes.
uh, pretty realtor friendly. He is a realtor. We have a rent control bill. I think everybody's going to be watching how he votes on 3054.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things at play going into that Senate seat. So we will be watching with bated breath, Reagan.
Well, and I think that's kind of why it makes sense to talk about the elections now because the calculation about the vote I'm just going to blow people's minds right here, is not always about what is the exact best policy. It's sometimes about can I take the yes or the no and get reelected? Sometimes it enters their brain occasionally. It happens. They think
Yeah.
about it. No, it's a big part of the calculation, especially on the big votes that matter. The little stuff, yes, no, is kind of dependent more on what you think about, what the policy is, who's bringing it forward, and what you had for lunch that day. But the big votes, or if you didn't have lunch, the big votes are way more about who your friends are, who your coalition is, and can you get
Yeah.
reelected, right? And is this a vote that makes or breaks reelection? And I think so.
Yeah.
That's why, as you're getting to the end, as you're getting to CapCon, we just had a CapCon hearing on Friday. People, that list has a lot to do with who do we need to keep here in the building. Um, Again, just saying
Who's bringing
many
home the
unsaid
pork?
things. Who's bringing home the pork? Who is it? Transportation package, right? If that package happens, and I have a lot. I'm just going to say this right now. I have a lot of questions. Normally, leadership gets involved in big packages like this. If they're involved, I don't see it, and I'm sort of interested in why they're letting it to continue to languish the way it is. Because I don't, just sort of ear to the ground. I do not think Democrats have 36 and 18 for those tax increases that the co-chairs put forward. I don't think they have the votes to increase the payroll tax for transit that nobody is riding. I
Mm.
don't think they have a bunch of people signing up for new taxes. And a lot of them are going to really be tempted not to vote for the taxes for electric vehicles too, because the whole point of the Democratic side of switching to electric, before they decided Elon was the devil, was that it reduces the greenhouse gas emissions, right? That's the whole theory behind it. Now, in the vehicle, yes. In the production of the vehicle, maybe not. They just sort of ignore that. So, but we have to. They don't pay into the state highway trust fund, the highway trust fund, hardly at all. They pay when you renew your sticker, and so the way you make that up is you force them into the mileage program. You force them their registration fees to be much higher. I don't know that Democrats want to vote for that because guess what? All the Portland wine moms are probably driving electric vehicles or have at least one. They've got a giant SUV, a gas guzzler, and then also an electric vehicle. And the electric vehicles for appearances, right? So I don't think the transportation package is a done deal whatsoever. I think they're trying to make something exist that doesn't exist right now.
Well,
And
I would
when
just
is leadership going to take control of the building and the key issues to get us home? That's the part I do not get yet. When are they going to show up and say, actually, maybe somebody should have a plan?
probably after well, let's get through the budget on Wednesday, and then we'll then we'll see. We might have to do a special pod on the budget if there's anything
Revenue forecast,
surprising.
yes,
Yeah,
the
the revenue
revenue
forecast.
forecast will matter. But I'll tell you, we're going to be up slightly. I think that's
All
just
right.
exactly what it is.
Good.
Because what the new state economist, and nothing against his credentials or anything, but everybody knows he was brought here to make the kickers smaller. That is literally the unions were literally calling for McMullen's head, saying, "Hey, this guy, the
Yeah.
kickers have been too large." Now, I don't think it was his fault. I think he was a traditional conservative economist who did not want to bankrupt state government. I think he was a kind of a good guy, and the unions can't stand staring at all of that money going back to taxpayers. They hate it. They hate that it hits the bank account of the state and then goes back out to taxpayers. It's like the number one thing they can't stand. They think it should be in their, they should hand it over to all the union members. They should make the
Hmm.
salary pot bigger. They should do everything for them. Give Capitol employees paid parking. It's silly.
Crazy. Reagan going
So
off on leadership.
I
Oh.
am. I am going off right now because somebody needs to be in charge here, and
Well, they have
nobody's
to
in
land the
charge.
plane, right? That's their job is to land the
Yes.
plane. I think you might be a little premature on landing the plane right now, but I do think they do seem oddly missing out of the discussions, and I do think that I think you're right there that they should be in the discussions so they know how to land the plane instead of just relying on staff or those people in the discussions to land the
Yes,
plane. Here's the way I see transportation playing out. It doesn't affect the race in Medford at all. Not one iota. Nobody down there gives two shits about
correct.
transportation. So that race is not going to be settled on that. That's going to be settled on whether or not people believe Jeff Golden's wildfire debacle was the what he should be going back to the Senate over. I think that is clearly the and of course, you know how Democrats destroy our economy, all the things. But transportation won't matter. Where it will matter, I believe, is in Thatcher's district, and it will matter in Meek's district, especially, and how those folks with Kevin Mannix running and in the transportation discussions could really affect if he runs for Senate, how he takes that vote and what's in that bill and all the things. Meek's seat, I think, is clearly in the eyes of transportation. That is literally the eye of the hurricane on the problem with transportation is that
205 and tolling.
in
That's
Oregon
it. Those
City
are the two
is
things.
for it. So
Yeah.
um,
No, you're right. Well,
let's
we're
leave it there because I got to
yeah.
go watch my son. He's the number one golfer. Vicky's
Yes.
looking at me. She's running out the door. He tees off at 11 a.m. He's playing number one for Cook County in districts, so they got to play well the next 2 days so they can go to state, which is at Chocotee next week. So
Wow. Well, good luck.
so-
Good luck to him. And hilarious that Representative Breeze Iverson is asking you to be on time. So, what? Oh, shoot. Maybe we need to edit that out, Brian. Whoopsie. If I can keep my job. All right.
He's yelling at you, Reagan. See ya.
See ya.
Got a bill, I wanna make it sway. People talking left and right, but we're gonna do this thing tonight. Oh, yeah. Time to make a move, can't afford to lose. Got the votes to prove what we're gonna do. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La, 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 yeah. Moving bills through an open door. Round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. Representatives and senators meet, trading words to find the perfect beat. Committee hearings all day long, till we finally sing the same song. Oh, yeah. Amendments flying high, watch them pass on by. Gotta give and try, make this bill fly. We're dancing back and forth on the Senate floor. La, la, yeah, yeah. Moving bills through an open door. Round and round until we score. This is what we came here for. Dancing on the Senate floor. When the votes align, and the count is right. Feel that Oregon pride, as we pass it tonight. We're dancing.